Hey guys, it's Mikefield here. We have 3 awesome builds today. A build by Cloaked Goliath, which revolves around the LEPER. A build by MANGLE, which is a stress damage over time build. And finally, a build by ZEDUS, which is a straight up tanky stress build. Now guys, if you're enjoying yourselves, please remember to follow and subscribe for more awesome content. There are also a lot of links in the description below, which will take you to those builds in action. So you'll see me playing them or other players controlling those builds. Let's go and get started. So first of all guys, the Goliath. This is one of my very favorite builds right now, and I really used to hate the LEPER. And this build convinced me that LEPER is not garbage. Actually, LEPER can be quite strong if you build the team around him. And this composition is specifically tailored to, facilitate what LEPER does. So just have a look at what he does and what items you should be wearing, what skills you should be using, and so on and so forth. So first of all, the LEPER setup. You can see the trinkets here. We have the Jagged Chopper and the Gladiator's Mask, and this build has to be tailored for the meta, so you might actually want to be using the Exotic Snuff here instead of the Axe here. That will probably give you some more sustained damage against movement, so you'll not have to really worry that much about your opponents moving you to different positions if you use this setup. This does, however, take away from your damage, so you have to kind of consider whether you really want to be doing this or not. Now, this build has a lot of potential, so what you do here is you definitely take Revenge and Solemnity. These two skills are those kind of core staple LEPER things. This is an insanely strong heal, and also a stress heal, by the way. You can use it twice per battle. That's probably the strongest single target heal in the game. And secondly, the Revenge is, everybody knows what Revenge does. It gives you damage, crit accuracy. It's just really powerful, guys. Now, LEPER has, is a character that has very, very high baseline stats. So we have extremely high base damage. We have very high resistances. When you pair this with the Snap, you're very difficult to move. But obviously, it's kind of going to be the case sometimes, because if you go against an Abomination or a BH, you will eventually land in that third position and become useless. So you kind of have to, play this team with this thing in mind. Now, your core skills are Heal or Chop. This is basically up to you. I really like Heal right now because there are quite a few very tanky front lines that you can just obliterate with the Heal. However, obviously taking the Chop is very powerful as well. Chop is extremely reliable. It does a lot of damage. Well, both those skills actually do a ton of damage, but Chop has significantly more crit chance. So if you just stack that crit on your LEPER, you'll definitely see some results there. Now, LEPER is extremely tanky as well, so the only real downside of taking the LEPER on your team is really the fact that he will occasionally just get moved and become useless, right? So you have to take this into consideration. You have to remember that, if you have some movement on the enemy team, if you go first, stun them. If you don't go first, well, you just kind of have to face the consequences of you picking the LEPER indeed, because you will probably pay for taking the LEPER on your team sometimes. That's why he's not like an S tier character. He has very limited movement options. One move is not enough. Right. However, if you don't face those move comps, you will usually just obliterate people's front lines. And if you're good enough at, understanding when to use the Jester properly, you will definitely dominate. Let's go to the Crusader now. And Crusader is nothing special, guys. That's a typical Stunbot setup. We have the Sacred Blade with the Writ of Execution. That's more reliability, more accuracy, more damage. This means that, this pesky Jester, this pesky Shield Breaker will not dodge your stunning blows. And that's very important to have this, I think. People run different things. People run the Gauntlet as well here. So people run this thing over here, the Brass Knuckles, and they give you some bonus stun chance, but they do not have that reliability of 8 accuracy that you otherwise have. So you have to just remember about this. That's a very, very important thing to keep on your team. I think this is basically the ultimate Crusader setup. It would be very difficult to convince me otherwise. You have to remember that this doesn't really add anything to your Zealous Accusation though, so Zealous is a ranged skill, as I was reminded by someone recently, so this kind of doesn't work with Accusation that well, but you still have the lands. So if you land in those further positions down the line, you can always just facilitate the Holy Lands to dish out insane amounts of damage. Right, so this being said, we are going to the Jester. So Crusader, guys, is going to be first and foremost your main stun character. And then he also has insane amounts of damage and some really good utility, because you can also remove the debuffs and heal with the Rally to the Flame and delayed game stages of the fights. So he's definitely just a reliable source of damage and control. Obviously, the 10% blow, a death blow chance is also nothing to scoff at, so you can usually, get those semi-reliable kills with the Crusader. Just remember about that. Finally, no, not finally, okay, we're jumping to the Jester here. There are quite a few schools of thought here as to what people do with the Jester. I personally started running the finisher because, you know, you just do a lot of damage with the Leper. So people will land on 0 HP and you'll have those opportunities to just use the Jester to move forward with the direct stab and get those executions. There's 10% bonus here, 25% bonus here. You land at what, 35% chance to resist the death blow for this average character, which is very, very big. Wait, this is 25, wait, this is like, that's 40% actually, 40% chance to resist. That's really, really good nonetheless. Also, the accuracy on low HP helps you with landing those direct stabs on those more agile, dodgy characters. So generally speaking, by the way you want to play the turn with this composition is, first of all, you activate the Leper, use the Revenge, and then you go with the Jester and you drop the Ballad. This means that you will always hit all your attacks. You can also sometimes just seize the day if you see an opportunity, you know, to just drop the Ballad and start attacking a squishy frontline with the Leper without using the Revenge. You can also do this. You know, 15 accuracy, 35% damage, 11% crit is huge, but sometimes it's more beneficial for you to just go aggressive turn 1 and just try to eliminate those squishy targets from the get-go. But then you also really need to drop the Ballad anyway. I think Ballad is one of those most core skills for your team. And finally, so that's basically the Jester here. You have an option here to perhaps pick the Hemlock, which adds some blight damage to your basic attacks. So to basically most of the Jester skills, Harvest and Direct Stab will actually inflict the blight here, but that's, I think, not necessary with how much damage this composition has in general. But you know, you can experiment with this. I feel like the finisher is just this kind of more reliable thing that allows you to close out those games in which you would have normally struggled if you had, you know, no finishers on this team. I've seen people run finisher on the Leper though, but that I don't think is that strong. So finally we have the Arbalest here, and the Arbalest is your core support. You actually have a lot of damage because you take the Piercing Quarrel. You can sometimes, if you feel like you are getting moved too much, so if in your tier there's like there are quite a few people running the BHs, or running the Occultists, then you might actually want to consider taking the Snuff. Other than that, this is a very, very strong setup because it allows you to both dish out consistent damage if you need to, and also to heal your allies. This item actually gives you quite a bit of protection as well, so this means that your Arbalest becomes incredibly tanky of a character. Now, your role is mostly to make sure that your frontliners, or you know, the other 3 characters, are not permanently stunned. So you have to consider like what the amount of stuns that or the number of stuns your opponent has, and then just adjust to that, right? So you just use Illuminating Flare to usually just clear the stuns. If you get the chance to attack, then you do, but you really want to be keeping this Arbalest for the very last moment in the fight, or just decide whether to do damage, whether to heal, or whether to drop the flare, right? Those are usually your 3 choices. They're all very viable, so it's just up to you and your game sense as to what you do. So, generally speaking, as I said, this game plays out in this kind of very slow fashion at first, where you just drop the Ballad, you drop the Revenge. Sometimes you may want to purge the frontliners. If you have, like, the enemy has the Leper, that's a 50-50 movement, usually, if they are not running the Snuff. If they have the Abomination, again, quite likely to work if they haven't transformed yet. That's also quite a good idea to kind of consider that. Other than that, I don't think you want to be pushing the Crusader back, unless you're playing this heavy stress comp that relies on the Crusader to dish out those enormous amounts of stress, which he totally does dish out. I feel like you don't really want to be purging the Crusader, because he's way bigger of a threat if he Holy Lances you than if you just kind of keep him at the front, you know, stunning your own Crusader, which you'll probably be doing all the time. So this being said, guys, this is all I have to say about this build. I really like it. I have seen some really decent success with this. I think my win rate's about 70-80% with this. If you want to check out Goliath's stream, you can go there and you'll see how he plays the build. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's go to build number 2. Alright guys, build number 2. And again, I was not convinced to this at first, but I really feel confident to say that this build is indeed very strong right now. Because I did test it as well, on top of, you know, being just utterly demolished by it a couple of times. So it works very well in some specific situations, guys. So, we have the Flagellant, we have the Abomination, we have the Grave Robber, and we have the Antiquarian. But this build is extremely spicy in a few regards that you will see over time. I actually made some of my own alterations here, so I'll tell you about like what Mangle does with this build and what I actually feel to be kind of what I would do with this build, or what I'd actually do with this build myself. So first of all, Flagellant. And you have quite a few options for the Flagellant alone. And you can actually pick and choose a couple of things here. So first of all, the trinkets. And the trinkets, you have a lot of variety in the Flagellant overall, so I think there are quite a few decent possibilities. First of all, Gauntlet Absolution I think is a necessity, so I would always take it. This is a lot of healing bonuses. This is some protection, this is, you know, stress reduction on being hit, so your Flagellant is very, very unlikely to even get afflicted in fights. So I feel like this is just a very, very powerful baseline item. Makes you very difficult to kill, makes you an incredibly reliable healer if you go against AoE damage, and also just gives you a lot of reliability in terms of damage because this item has a crapload of accuracy and a bonus against the bleeding targets. So you can take either the Crown of Thorns or you can take the Confessor's Gauntlet here. So you can run the double gauntlet build here, I think that's pretty fine. I've been running this though, I kind of feel like this is the bonus accuracy actually pays dividends here, but obviously either of these two is a good idea here. And then finally, if you feel like there is a lot of movement on the enemy part, like if you know people in your rank are actually using a lot of movement skills, just take the Snuff. Again, it's like up to you what you do. This is a bit more risky because then you are just kind of punishing your own accuracy. And remember, guys, Exsanguinate has pathetic accuracy, so you really want to have some at least a little bit of a boost to it. So perhaps you know taking this might be a bit too greedy. Taking this is okay, but again, you kind of cripple your healing, so it's kind of dodgy, right? Especially that Snap actually has a minus accuracy trait here, so you should kind of take this into consideration as well. But generally speaking, I don't really like running Snuff on the Flagellant. I feel like people usually kind of don't think about this too well. Like every single time the Flagellant is moved, he can just jump back into first anyway. And then usually, like if your Flagellant is moved, he'll very often be just below this HP threshold, but he'll be just still able to redeem. And you know you have quite a lot of movement on this team, so it's usually feasible to just kind of get the Leper to the front anyway. So if Leper goes here, you know you can always just Shadow Fate here. With your Grave Robber, you're gonna be okay. So I don't think the Snuff has that much validity right now. You may obviously take it if you want to, but that's not a necessary thing. And as far as the skills go, we have just this kind of staple setup for the Flagellant. We have the Punish, the Reign of Sorrows, the Exsanguinate, and the Redeem. And those skills are very straightforward to use. So generally speaking, you're trying to do as much damage as possible. So you drop Reign of Sorrows on turn 1. And then if you have like this priority target at the front, you just drop Punish on them. Remember, Punish is incredibly high critical mod, so this means that it will very likely just hit, crit, and bleed. It's just a lot of damage that you know your opponent has to work with. Then we have this Reign of Sorrows, which is just 4 bleed per turn. That's very good as well. I've seen people also using the Hemlock on the Flagellants. But then you just kind of give up one of these two items, or you give up the second gauntlet, which I don't think is really something you'd like to be doing here. So it's entirely up to you what you run, but I feel like this is the necessity, and then whatever else is like some very decent flavor that you just add to your composition. This is just a lot of reliability. People tend to actually dodge. There are quite a few very dodgy backliners, like the Antiquarians, the Houndmasters, the Jesters. You just consistently avoid the Reign of Sorrows, so getting this additional accuracy here actually helps a lot. It just depends on what your read on the meta is and how you feel about risking your first turns, and they may be going very poorly sometimes for you this way. Now, this being said, guys, you have those skills, and that's basically it. Like if you are low HP or ally is low HP as well, so one of those characters, you just drop the Redemption. This should always take you to full HP or close to full HP with this item over here. That's a very powerful healing skill, right? Then, when you consider this, you can also use the Exsanguinate, which is, by the way, very low accuracy, basically to really look at the tooltip that you'll see on the right here and assess if it is worth actually using the Exsanguinate, whether it wouldn't be just better to drop the Redeem. So, but the rule of thumb is you don't Exsanguinate the Lepers, and you don't Exsanguinate the Jesters, and you don't Exsanguinate Shieldbreakers, because this will usually just backfire, right? You just have to really pay attention to the tooltip. You have no Jester on this team, so you just have to be very careful with your Exsang, because it's just very low accuracy skill that may backfire. You don't get any healing at all if you actually miss it, so you still get all the penalties, but you don't get any healing. So that's just very, very risky to use it if you don't have high accuracy or your opponent doesn't have quite low dodge. And that's it for the Flagellant. Now let's go to the A-Bomb, and that's actually, the Abomination has some really good spicy stuff in here. So first of all, the trinkets, that's kind of, I think this is basically the best setup you can be running here. So the Wretch's Cloak, that's additional horror, that's basically this 128 stress per transformation if you do choose to transform. With this build, you'll be usually transforming at the very late stages of the game or by the end of your turn. So you usually keep that, if there is no stun threat on the enemy team, you probably want to drop the Beast Bile on turn 1, then just wait with the Repose until the very end, very last move of turn 2. And when you have this very last move of turn 2, you transform to the Beast form. And at the very beginning, your first move on turn 3 will then be the transformation back to the human form and dropping another Beast Bile. This means that the downtime of the Repose is going to be incredibly low. And you can just keep repeating this rotation. It's very powerful. If you just do it like this. So remember guys, so first of all, you drop the Beast Bile at the very start of the fight if the enemy has any semblance of AoE, and then you just sit on this Beast Bile until the end of your turn number 2, because the duration of Repose, which is 1 turn, is counted by the turns this character takes. So the more you delay the turn, the more you make out of a single ability use. So you transform at the end of turn 2, back to the, you go into the Beast form, you do whatever, probably don't want to be moving from here though, right? You can probably Rake or something, and then on the following turn you just go back to the human form right away, so you basically just miss out a single move usually, if you go first, you know, a single move without the Repose, so that's very, very strong for you. And against like those high AoE teams, which are very common, right? There are like a lot of Antiquarians, Houndmasters, Jesters, Shield Breakers, right? This build is very strong, right, just because of the Repose, and people tend to underestimate it. Like, this skill shreds you. If you don't really pay attention to it, it's just going to kill you with Blight very, very quickly. So, again, we have like a lot of Blight skill chance here with this item as well, so this is very, very strong. We have a lot of accuracy with the Wretch's Cloak, so you don't really miss those skills either. We do copious amounts of stress, so overall, very, very strong build. And the Abomin, I feel, is an absolutely core character here for this build. We're moving on to the Grave Robber now. I actually have never been, or I never was a fan of this setup. But turns out it's very solid. So let's just go over this. So first of all, this is your bread and butter, the panic darts. You use them every single time you can. You target the characters that you want to prioritize, that you want to kill off very quickly. It works wonders. Like, there's a lot of blight damage. 140% base of this. This is like probably one of the very few skills that has very high DOT skill chance, right? 140% here means that you can reliably inflict this on anybody you want. You know, in combination with this item here, that's 20% more blight skill chance. That's 160%. Barely anybody can dodge this. I think PD is the exception here. And that's just incredibly powerful. You pair this with crit mod of 11.5% base, and the very high crit chance bonus as a base for the Grave Robber, and you have this incredibly potent build that crits most of the time, does copious amounts of stress damage here with this, and you can also actually do decent damage if you Shadow Fade, because this just increases your crit chance, increases your stress damage. So actually using the Shadow Fade if needed, and just dropping Panic Darts the following turn is not a waste of a turn. You usually get a lot out of this. And this is ridiculous amounts of stress. You can do like 70-80 stress easily with a crit Panic Darts from stealth. Amazing skill. That's an amazing skill, guys. So never underestimate this. Obviously accuracy could have been higher, but we alleviate this with those two items. By the way, these two give us pretty decent dodge, as well as you have like 12 dodge overall. We have 32 here. That's quite reliable. I feel like this is just a very, very strong setup. If you want to finish somebody off, guys, and they are not stressed hard enough, because you do a lot of damage over time, so your opponents will end up on low HP very often. You can just drop a lunge on them. That's 20% dev low chance. So this brings you kind of in line with, you know, the character having the finisher, right? It's very, very reliable as well. So that's basically it for the GR. You just try to stress them with the Panic Darts as much as possible. You get out of all those tricky sticky situations using the Shadow Fade, and you're usually good to go. And this just kind of stacks over time. The stress is huge, and it's just very, very reliable. I think this is quite a powerful character indeed. So finally, we're going to the Antiquarian. It's very spicy, guys. There are 2 possible builds for this, or 3 possibly. My favorite is this, because since you do a lot of damage, you have the finisher here. This AoE finisher, unless you're bellowed, you really kill people with this. I have been able to execute multiple opponents with this so far. It's very powerful to just drop the death blows here with the festering vapors. You can kill multiple targets at the same time. Really nice of a skill. Obviously, this means that you don't have the Tears of the Lost, which means that against a against a repose composition, you'll probably struggle a little bit. Other than that, you're just kind of reliably executing people. By the way, this gives you 20 more accuracy against low HP targets. So if you're able to take your opponents to low HP, your vapors, which have rather low accuracy, will actually be quite nicely facilitated by the finishers. It's a lot of added value here. Finally, Materia Pestis. I think this is a necessary trinket for your Antiquarian because you just want to have the Blight duration here. Blight skill chance is also very nice, so that's just an ultimate item for damage over time compositions. As I said, you can switch this for this. If you want some extra survivability and dodge, you can obviously just take the Black Mirror here. It's also very powerful and gives you some more like survivability and utility here for this Antiquarian. But barely anybody targets the Antiquarians right now, mostly because of their ability to take cover, which, you know, means that you just kind of get out of most of the sketchy situations. It's not really worth revealing the Antiquarian either, so I feel like this is very, very solid setup. Now there has been like a discussion as to what to take, whether you take the Flash Powder or take the Protect Me. I think on this particular composition, you can take the Flash Powder just to reveal stealth targets, but if you feel like you meet a lot of those, I think if you meet like a lot of characters that target the backline, like the Arbalest, like the enemy Flagellants as well, you can use the Protect Me here to just kind of drop it on the Flagellant, and this will force the guard, right? This means the Flagellant takes the damage instead of you. It takes a lot of pressure off your hands, and this just basically allows this Antiquarian to thrive, right? That's quite a decent setup as well. So all these skills together mean that this composition is very reliable, very solid. It does its job quite nicely. As I said, you usually open with the Abomination, you do the rotation I discussed, and then it's basically up to you what you follow this up with. You may want to drop the regeneration at first if you're playing against a repose comps, but generally speaking, you just dish out the AoE, dish out crazy amounts of stress, do your rotations correctly, and you're just really, really far ahead in most of those fights. So if you just play this composition, as I said, correctly, you will see results. Again, it's very, very powerful, has a lot of potential as well. Very difficult to kill because of the Flagellant, because of how dodgy those characters are, very difficult to target it down. You know, it's kind of hard to pin those guys down as well. So I feel like this one just won't struggle against a lot of other things. I recommend you guys test this one and check it out yourselves. And this brings us to our final composition, guys. Finally, we have our tanky stress boys. And we have this very nice setup here with the Crusader, the MAA, the Abomination, and the Houndmaster. Let's just go over those characters. Let's talk about what this team does. So first of all, the Crusader again here. It's a tanky character. I really like to take the Sacred Blade because this makes your stuns reliable. People have actually, I've seen people take the Pit Fighter's Helm here, but it just doesn't seem to work for me. I feel like this is just enough to keep yourself in those games, to land those stuns on crucial targets, and also to drop those Zealous Accusations quite reliably just with the Root of Execution and bonus stress provided by it. So I feel like this is the ultimately better setup, just because of those stuns that you can reliably get, and also the Virtue Chance that will sometimes save you and allow you to salvage those more stress-oriented fights, right? So that's a very, very nice setup here. This team is very tanky, so as I said, this is just extremely hard to kill. However, the stress damage it does is not as high as some other comps do. So you have to just take this into consideration. You might lose to those faster damage over time compositions, which just tend to, you know, out-damage you quite heavily, and this means that you kind of die before you get your scaling into the late game off. Okay, so this is the Crusader. You try to drop the Zealous Accusations unless you have some priority target you want to interrupt, then you drop the Stunning Blow. Number 2, the MAA. Scream at them until they're dead. If you see a lot of dodge, remember you always do have the command buff here, and the command is incredibly powerful, so I recommend that you use this against like Jesters, the Shield Breakers, right? Just dropping this turn 1 allows your Houndmaster to reliably land those Hound Rushes and Hound Harries. Actually, Harries are the main issue here, so I would always you know, advise you to drop this if you see a lot of dodge on the enemy team. You have the guard here. I don't think this needs that much discussing. Bellow is incredibly powerful. You probably want to be spamming this unless you have you see the opening to use the bolster when you play against the stress comp, or the command if you play against the dodge comp, right? So that's just basically how it goes. Remember, command also gives you a little bit of crit chance, so this can sometimes allow you to actually land those crit blows more efficiently. And this means that your Houndmaster, your Crusader, your Abomination will actually do copious amounts of damage. Now, as far as the Abomination goes now, guys, I've been actually thinking, okay, Trinkets on the MAA, obviously, Pitfighter's Helm, Insignia of Rank. I think there's like very little competition here. These are basically the best items there are, right? So that's just basically what you do. Finally, the Abomination, there are a few positions for the Abon to be in. Like, first of all, you can just put him first, but this means you usually don't get to use your crucial skill Beast's Bile, which you probably want to use on the very first turn. So I would advise against this. You can put him second, but then you're very vulnerable to pushes. And there are quite a few pushing characters right now in the meta. You have the Bounty Hunters, and you have the Abominations. That basically means that you can get pushed to third very easily, and pushed to fourth very easily, and then you just are denied your turn. So second, probably not the best spot in the world. This one, the first one is the safest because you cannot get pushed out too far, but at the same time, it is also has like the least potential of the three, right? This is probably the safest spot here, where you can only be threatened by pools, so only the BH on Occultist can threaten you. There are not so many Occultists in play, and you just BHs are in like 1 game out of 5 or 6, so this will mess you up sometimes. But if you just go first, you drop this Beast Bile, then you can kind of waste your second turn as well. It's okay. So if you see a lot of AoE on your enemies, like skills that basically target the back row. Also, by the way, Flagellance will always target the third. So with the Reign of Sorrows, you can actually use this to great effect when you do it like this. So if you do it like, if you have the Abomination in the third, you just drop the Beast Bile on first, and then we said this before, you just wait until turn number 2. The end of turn number 2 is like the very last round of turn number 3 to activate, turn number 2 to activate the Abomination. You transform into the Beast form, and do whatever you want, or you can push somebody back, you can do really whatever you need. And then at the very beginning of the following turn, you activate the Abomination again, and then you just drop back to human form and drop the Beast Bile. And this secures you into multiple turns of free revenge, even though a free riposte, even though this riposte only lasts for a single turn. On paper, you can just extend it by using this trick. Now, Abomination, as we said, is this kind of stress-focused characters, hence Wretch's Cloak, hence Clasp of the Beast for some extra tankiness. You might also want to use some other trinkets here. I think it's not such a bad idea to just use the spike chain here for this extra blight skill chance and damage to range skills, which your riposte actually works with very nicely. I've seen people use the Taste of Grandeur here, not my favorite item, but you know, we can just risk it with the Virtue chance. Shattered Padlock, if you feel like you need some movement, is also a good bit of utility. So all those items kind of come together very nicely. So as I said, your main role here is to just drop the Beast Biles, transform Beast Bile again over and over again. And finally, you have the Houndmaster here, and the trinket choice here is quite wide, honestly. I personally really like to use the Monkey Paw here, which I don't seem to have available straight away. It's here, right? So I'm just going to move it so that you guys can see the stats with it. Let's just move it to the Houndmaster. So that's like the most greedy setup, which gives you 0 defenses. So you can just drop the Monkey Paw here instead of the Whistle. This means that you get some extra accuracy and some dodge as well. This means this Houndmaster suddenly becomes very, very tanky. It's always nice to have that on your HM. So then the Crimson Hook adds a lot because you have a lot of damage that you deal against bleeding targets. So from turn 2 onwards, you'll usually just obliterate people with the amount of stress that this character can do. So it's crazy useful to just have this trinket on yourself. And as I said, this is just kind of the greedy alternative to the Monkey's Paw. However, it does have the extra bleed skill chance, so it helps you against the Crusaders, for instance, who have, generally speaking, very high bleed resistances. So finally, skills here. I like using Hound's Rush sometimes because some of your targets will indeed have very, very high riposte count on their teams. So then you can kind of, alleviate this by just using Hound's Rush. Obviously, this doesn't push your agenda forward because it does no stress, but at least bleeds your target and keeps you busy for a turn. And you have no anti-courier on this team, so there is no regen available to you to alleviate the pressure that the riposte team might have. Then we have the Lick Wounds, which is your healing skill. It's very good to have this always. I think it's just kind of nice utility for you. And finally, the Guard ally here, especially when you pair it with the Monkey Paw, is extremely potent. It gives your Houndmaster very, very high dodge chance here. We have 30 base here, and this adds you additional 20. You have 50 dodge this way. It's really hard to break this guard, even for like the Crusader with Writ of Execution. They'll be risking a lot just to break the guard that your Houndmaster provides. So overall, again, a very powerful setup here. This Houndmaster will be probably doing the most stress damage on your team as well, so I recommend just taking these items and testing them out, trying if this works. And, you know, if you feel like super greedy, you can just do this as well. It's probably not that bad at all. So, that's basically it for this team, I think. So how this team plays out is that you basically just drop your Beast Bile Tier 1. If you play against stress and you see no disruption on the enemy team, you may just drop the Bolster, which basically just kind of helps you survive longer. Then if you see some interruption, you can also just, you know, preempt it by using the Stunning Blows here with the Crusader. And that's just basically how it works. Other than that, you just spam the accusations, you spam the bellows, you spam the Beast Bile with the combo of the transform on the very last moment of your turn, and finally you just spam the Hound's Harries. That's like probably the simplest composition to play out of the three, but it is extremely efficient. I've seen a lot of success with this, but however you have to remember that the damage over time comes that are probably becoming more and more popular will take advantage of you usually. That's very difficult to deal with them unless you're just, I think, unless you're lucky or you have like extremely good game sense to kind of counterplay what they're doing. So you just have to consider this and yeah, enjoy the builds, guys. And that's gonna be it for me. So, guys, this is it. So if you did enjoy the video, I hope you did, please remember to subscribe, to follow me on Twitch, link below, and also check out the videos in the description for more awesome guides, for the gameplay videos of those builds, and so on and so forth. Thank you. See you in the future episodes.